Counting Hats, Kidnapping, Aburns Best Buzzer Beaters, and Psychic Hokum. Jesus, rough start. That's right. We are reviewing the pilot episode of Psych on the pilot episode of this podcast.
I've heard it both ways.
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 And welcome to the debut episode, the pilot episode of I've Heard It Both Ways. I'm your friendly neighborhood backcracker, Dr. Joe. And with me, as always, is my other hunk in crime, Humpback Johnson. How's it going, Hump?
That's really good. Very good one to start. I'll just call you the standard ones, like Methuselah Honeysuckle. It's one of my favorites. But what a strong start. That was great for initial.
Thank you. I've got a couple in the works, and that's the one I picked, Humpback Johnson.
Please write that.
I've got them all written down, baby. So welcome everyone. Billy and I are very excited. Hump, I should say, and I are very excited to do this show tonight. And each and every week we'll be breaking down an episode of Psych, starting with season 1. And Hump, we've got a little breakdown of how the show's going to go.
Oh yes, we do. First, we're going to start with a holla, and then we're going to end with a creamsicle.
And if there's time in between, we're going to throw in a little Thundercats. Oh!
Yes, so this will be a lot of fun. This is my all-time favorite show. And Joe, today I had an epiphany. It struck me like a bolt of freaking lightning. So I was sitting in my car, going over my thoughts as I was coming back from getting some Shake Shack and thinking to myself, why do I like this show so much? Well, it's a classic whodunit mixed with a comedy. And what's my favorite movie of all time? Well, it's Clue. And Clue is basically this kind of template. Obviously, this is a procedural cop show mixed with comedy, but there's a lot of dry humor, and it pays so much homage over the entire series, from having Tim Curry in it and having an entire Clue episode at one point. And just, Sean Spencer does the, yeah. But this is, my favorite show of all time because it's so similar to the most influential movie, so at least my comedy stylings of my lifetime. And it just holds a special place in my heart. It got me through a tough time in my life, if we're being honest. I know Dork just did the Happy Place episode, things that make them happy. And this is a show I go to whenever I need something to watch.
Yeah, I when we were talking about this, I learned that I wouldn't say you've only just started watching this show recently, but you didn't really watch it as it was going on week by week. And so I think I started watching this show halfway through season 2, maybe early season 3, but it was on when I was in chiropractic school. So it was something I could watch, while studying and have it on in the background. And I quickly fell in love with the show. And I love it a ton. And so I've probably, watched this series 3-4 times over. It's become one of those shows that I got my wife into when we were dating at the time. She loves it. It's actually one of the few side ventures that I'm doing that she's actually on board with. She's very excited about. But it's one of those shows that we will put on when we're going to bed. And, we put on an episode, and then, we wake up in the morning and it's still running. And so this, Seinfeld, Simpsons are probably the 3 shows that I have just committed to memory. Just, I can pull quotes from any time, talk about, any episode at any time. And so it, like you said, I love a whodunit. I've always been a big mystery guy. And, it goes back to when I was a kid at my grandparents' house. My grandma would always have Columbo and Murder, She Wrote on. So I'm an old soul in that way. I love Sherlock Holmes. I love Hercule Poirot. So I love a good, whodunit, a good mystery. And this show is a cop procedural, but with great humor, great crimes, and very excited to talk about it.
Yeah, it's a delicious whodunit, without a doubt. I mean, I don't even really love the pineapple that came out of this as their logo, but, it is what it is, and I've fully embraced it now. Our guy, the real Brick, says, "Is Billy a swinger?" Just saying. Is that shirt just lying around? No, I bought it specifically because I saw it, and I was like, oh, a pineapple shirt. I love Psych. And over the course of, over 100 episodes, we'll, have an episode for every single one of them. Today, we're discussing the pilot, obviously, and before we delve into like the actual how we break it down, the pilot, it's a pilot. It's pretty good. I don't know if you want to kick us off here with the holler, Joe, but want to get it started?
Yeah, so what the holla is going to be is the holla and Thundercats Ho is going to be sort of our episode breakdown. So holla is going to be sort of the introduction to the episode, and then we'll just sort of go from there. So what we get with this episode, the pilot, is as you get with all pilots, your introduction to the characters, and it sets up the premise of the show. And so what Psych does is sort of their cold open to every episode is it goes back in time to the early mid 80s. And that's another great thing about the show. So many 80s references, the pop culture
90s.
references, and 90s. The pop culture references are through the roof. And so it always starts off with a younger Sean, in his early teens. And there's a scenario between him and his dad, and there's a lesson to be learned. And 1 second here, I'm going to say goodnight to Swaggins. He's making a debut. Can you say goodnight, kiddo?
Aww.
I love you very much.
Oh, what a first episode.
First episode. You get Swaggins. I love you very much, kiddo. I'll see you in the morning, okay?
Well, if that isn't going to endear you to a podcast, that isn't any, like, I don't know, you don't have a heart. But yeah, like a good father-daughter moment, and there's a lot of father-son moments early on, and he's kind of teaching him to be a cop. I wouldn't really say any of them are nice, though. Yeah,
Henry's a prick. And you get that throughout the episodes and throughout the seasons and throughout the series. But what generally that cold open is it sort of there's a lesson to be learned there, and that lesson is then applied during the episode in some way. So there's some relevance to it. There's always usually some good humor in them. But what we get in this first, I'll call it a cold open, is you get an introductory to Sean's ability, right? He has this sort of eidetic memory, but it's also a skill that Henry hammers into him, and is what it is. They're in a diner, and Sean just wants a piece of cake. He just wants a piece of cake, but his son of a bitch father makes him close his eyes, and you tell him from memory how many hats are in the room.
Which I fucking hate. The hat counting is the thing that pisses me off. It would turn me off to the show, like if I was a new viewer to the show. It's so lame, and it comes back countless times. It even comes back again in this episode. Some nice symmetry. It never pays off in a really big way, but there are a lot of things in even the pilot episode that do pay off throughout the series, and even in the very last episode, there's a nugget there for you. But I think the main thing that you take away is that photographic memory that he has, and his ability to just see something and remember it. And the thing that I really like from the pilot that you kind of get even from that first cold open is his ability with, like, he locks in, you get that little sound effect, and then boom. And they've kind of kept that throughout the entire series, which is really something I like. They kept a lot of the same music throughout it too, but the cold opens, they kind of got away from it in the very last few seasons, but it's a staple of like 1 through 6. And I I don't love them, but some of them I love, but they're always a good story device.
Yeah, and I would say I like most of them. Some of them are just kind of like, and like you said, they are kind of a bit of a throwaway. But the purpose of them is to sort of give you a sort of a general, there's an element there, a lesson there that Sean's going to have to apply later on in the episode at some point, because as any good procedural you start to go down one path, it becomes a dead end, and then you got to start to meander down, some other paths until things get, wrapped up. So the pilot revolves around the case, is about
the McCallum family murders.
The McCallum family murders, kidnapping, right? And so the show actually starts off with Sean in a makeout sesh with some young lady, and the news is on in the background, and he's kind of got one eye on the girl, one eye on the TV, and he's able to solve the crime. So he calls the police, says, "I can solve this crime for you." And then, flash forward to the next day, he goes in to collect his reward. And now, as any pilot does, we're getting introduced to more and more characters. So this is where we meet Detective Carlton Lassiter, or Lassie, becomes a great foil to Sean throughout the entire series. And we're introduced to Detective Lucinda Berry, which, because it's a pilot, it's her only episode. And thank God for it. I did not like this actress. I do not like her character, and I don't like the fact that she is a love interest to Lassie, because
it pays off a little bit at the end too. It comes back around in like season 5 or 6, I believe, as well. She isn't too bad. I don't think everybody else liked her either, because they cut about 12 minutes out of the pilot that featured a lot of her.
Yep.
So probably for you, that's good. But as you said, you can see from the second he walks into the police station, he's reading people left and right, and it kind of pays off in the scene where they corner him and they keep him, and they're about to arrest him because they don't they don't believe. It's so unbelievable that somebody would have this ability to solve crimes just by watching the news. Hey, don't try to trivialize police work. I think you're doing a bang up job of that on your own. Like, he's got the quick quips going. He's very, very good. I mean, some people have said he's a little too over the top, but I love the way he sells things when he does the freak out with the leg kick. So that part really hooks me into the show. Yeah, it's a little bit of outrageous, and he's a little bit cooler in the first few seasons too. And then he kind of gets geekier as we go along. But that's kind of the transformation I think all of these characters have. But it's a very good setup to figure out why he is a fake psychic. And it's so believable too, because you'd like to think you could do that too if you had that power of observation. So he's, a regular guy that's kind of fallen into this life.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that they're about to arrest him, because the only way you could know this is if you had inside information. So he says he's a psychic to get out, and now he's got to he's got to pull a rabbit out of his ass, to get them to believe it. And so one of the things you see early on in the episode is as he's waiting in the police station, he's sitting next to a perp, and he notices some shards of broken brake light in the guy's shoe. And so he's like, your culprit in the waiting room, he did it, you'll find right? And sure enough, they go check.
Interrogation room 2, you'll find shards of taillight in his left shoe.
Exactly. and he's able to out, Lassie and his partner being in a relationship, right? So that kind of blows their mind. And so that right there, within the first 5 minutes of the show, you've got your entire setup for the entire series, which is great. And then so from there, it sort of it tailspins. There's this case, the McCallum case, the kidnapping, McCallum, sorry, and interim chief Vic approaches Sean and says, would you like a job? And so this is where Sean now gets pulled into doing police consulting.
And this is where we get the greatest character in, I think, at least cable television history.
Buzz?
Whatever you want to call him, Guy Buttersnaps, a.k.a. the Heater. There's so many different nicknames you can throw at him, but it is Burton Guster, Bruton Gasser, Brutal Hustler, a.k.a. the original G-string MC, Clap Your Hands. You get to meet him right off the bat, right after the Karen Vic thing, and Sean walks in and says, I've got us the last job we'll ever have. And, the psychic detective, and Gus is always reluctant to join him in almost anything. And there's a few things in this I don't like as much either, where he's like, there's going to be forensic guys there. But you kind of get the taste of Gus in that right there, like how nerdy he is, how tapped in he is to, Safecracker magazines and, just the nerdiest shit in the world. So him and Sean's friendship, I am going to state as fact, it is the best friendship in television history.
Oh, it's tremendous. And he's such a great straight man to Sean, but he's also off the wall himself, right? Just in a much different way, right? He craves buttery goodness, right? So Gus and Sean, they're a perfect tag team, great partners. And, Sean is the one, right, with all these this skill set, this detective skills, eidetic memory, but there's a lot of times where he can't solve a case without Gus.
Yeah, he's his logic brain.
Yeah, exactly.
He's his magic wish machine.
That's right. So that's just, that's another part of the show that I love. I know you love. It's a dynamic between
I know that
those two characters. That's right. I'm not telling the truth. So what we get is the McCallum murders and trying to figure out or kidnapping, I should say. And in this, we get one of Sean's first psychic visions, and it goes horribly wrong. He's just throwing shit against the walls. He's doing his whole thing, and a bit of a swing and a miss. But eventually, what happens through good detective work, because as much as Sean likes to hide the fact that he's really, really smart and he's really, really good at being a detective, he's able to, put it together. He's really good at it. And he figures out that the kid kidnapped himself and he's trying to collect a ransom. And so then he goes back for his psychic vision part 2, and he says, "I see a house, bop, 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 bop." And they go to this hidden cabin, and all the police are there. They're ready to, discover, find that the kid isn't kidnapped. And in fact, he's dead. And there's another dead body there as well. So now the case takes a wild turn here that we didn't see. And now Sean kind of has to go back to square one to figure out, oh shit, okay, now what the fuck is going on? Because before they thought it was just a simple, self-kidnapping case, has now become a double murder case. And so this is sort of where we get to our next, segment of the show. We're going to call it Thundercats Ho.
Oh.
Ho! And this is sort of where we'll discuss, sort of how the case was solved. And I don't know if there's anything, Bill, that you want to add that I either may have forgotten or that you want to touch upon before we sort of get to this part.
Well, I mean, we'll touch on the stuff at the end too, but I think I just want to point out when they're in the woods and they kind of figure out where he was by some detective work of Sean figuring out that he told us his daddy was going to clean up his act. And then, for 18 months, he hadn't been seen with this one kid, Malcolm Orso. And then they find out that, he has a family cabin. And that's where they're hiding out. Then they see the dog, but they see the dog with these tiny little binoculars. And he's like, well, what do you want me to do? They came with my Sports Illustrated and a tape of Auburn's Best Buzzer Beaters. And that to me was like my hint that this show is going to tickle my funny bone in all the right spots. And he's like, Auburn's Best Buzzer Beaters? Yeah, it was very specific. And that kind of like just little dab of humor in that serious moment. And I think that's what they do so well, because it is a procedural cop drama. And I've said for so long that you can't make comedies that are 44 minutes. It just, they don't usually work out. But right. This is a Law and Order episode sprinkled with, hilarity all over the place. And they get so much better at it, but there's enough of a taste to tell you we're going in the right direction in this first episode.
Yeah, and that's what's great, because there was a scene earlier on where Sean's sort of digging through the trash, and there's all these bags of expensive dog food, and why would someone
open 3 bags of dog food at once if you're not going to take him for a long trip?
Exactly, and it's funny that dog plays a big part into where we're gonna wrap things up with the episode. So,
and this CD case is totally nice. Why would somebody throw it out?
So what we get here is now you get more of a, you're peeling back some of the layers that is Sean Spencer and the relationship with his dad. So as I mentioned in the cold open, his dad's a prick. Well, we find out that Sean and his dad have not talked for years, and Sean didn't even know that his dad was back in Santa Barbara. Mm-hmm. So there's a strained relationship between those two characters. And so Sean finds out that his dad's in town because he gets pulled over by a cop, so Sean pulls out his card that says, my dad's a cop kind of thing. And the cop replies, "Tell the Fisher King I said hello," which is odd, but I don't know, for some reason.
No. Tell Henry the Kingfisher says
Kingfisher. See, here we are, right?
I'm your logic brain.
That's right. You're my Gus. That works out. It works out beautifully. And so, one of the things you get throughout this series is that even though that relationship between those two is strained, Sean still respects his father, because Henry, despite all of his personality flaws, is a really good detective in his own right. And so Sean goes to visit his father for the first time in a long time, and it is awkward and it is strained, but those two need each other. And
they even poke a little bit of the symmetry back at you, saying that he needs to sharpen and refine his skills, and he makes him counts all the hats in the room again, and there's a nice little twist in there. I heard cowboy boots walking out. I heard the spurs. So he's still, as sharp as ever. Yep. And that dynamic returns instantly in the same exact coffee shop that they were in the cold open. So, it struck me, I think, probably, I don't know, I've seen the series. You saw it, 3 or 4 times through. I've probably seen it like 30 No lie. It struck me one of like the later rewatches how well written and how well tied in everything is in this show. It's not just, surface layer stuff. There's a lot of good old fashioned just writing in here.
Yeah, these guys, the writing team, Steve Franks, but also, Sean and Gus, they become producers on the whole team. They don't miss a beat, and they don't miss anything. They don't gloss over anything. A lot of times, we see like in the MCU, for example, they'll talk about things, but there'll be time, like there'll be like these little things that don't make sense because they didn't like think them through, enough, or they just didn't care enough to tie them all together. Everything was Psych from the pilot episode to the last episode, all work together. There isn't a factoid. There isn't a reference. There isn't a thing that they've glossed over, skipped, or flat out ignored. And you see things, themes brought back throughout not just the episodes themselves, but through the seasons and the series as a whole. And so, you get Sean sort of rekindling that relationship with his dad, and then he puts it together that it was the father that actually killed the son, and it wasn't on purpose. It wasn't malicious, and because this is the one issue I had with this episode was sort of how this murder suicide was sort of staged. It didn't kind of look right, and Sean's able to pick that up. And so he puts together, and I'll let you kind of fill in some of the details in just a moment, but he puts together that the father is the one that went to confront his son at the cabin because he realized that his son was the one that had kidnapped himself. And through a tussle, he knocked his son over. He hit his head on the table and died. His accomplice walked in, and so he had to kill him because he couldn't have any witnesses. But it was Gus that actually was the one that was able to give Sean the proof so that he could tie the father to the crime, because Gus, as we know, is a pharmaceutical sales rep.
Contamine for dog bites.
That's right. And so while Gus is off taking a whiz, Sean's having this sort of, confrontation with the father, but the father's like, you will never be able to prove that. And then as they're leaving, Gus says, "Oh, I found that drug in the cabinet. It's to treat dog bites." And then Sean goes, boom, we got him, because he noticed that Mr. McCallum had the dog bite wound on his arm, and that's how they're able to wrap the case up successfully. And this goes back to, as smart as Sean is, as good as he is with his memory and putting things together, he'll oftentimes need Gus, for that one little bit of knowledge that helps sort of wrap everything up. And that's what's great about these two characters.
He needs them because sometimes he zones out when people talk, so he needs them to write down some stuff for him. But yes, I mean, and he wasn't taking a whiz. He was about to throw up on the Turkish carpet. That's why he had to go. That's why he stumbled upon. Right. I mean, I'm like an encyclopedia with this. Don't feel bad. Yeah. He stumbles upon the contamine in there. He tells Sean, "You're using the wrong tag." They leave. They get everybody to come there. They call, the cops on themselves to have it play out in front of an audience. And then Sean does his thing again. Check the wound. It's a fresh wound. Goes nuts. It plays out in front of everybody. And Lassie's like, "How did you do it?" And he's like, "I wish I knew." So everything, the way that they do this, the way that it's written, and that's the other thing, is you never know who the killer is. And that's another thing I realized on later rewatches of this show, is how good of a show would it have been if you just took all of the comedy out. It's still an interesting whodunit, a delicious whodunit, and who doesn't love that? So every time that I watch it, I still try to pick up the little things, and they hide it pretty well about who the killer is in most of these episodes, because I didn't finger the father. They had the swerve of the sister being the one who he's kind of dating as well, and he works so well with all of the ladies on the shows. We'll get to his love interest for, in fact, every other single episode for the rest of the way, and Juliet, who hasn't been even introduced yet. But for a first episode, it's devoid of a lot of the stuff. There's not a lot of catchphrases, but get to it now, right? Skull?
Yep. So I lost you there for a second, Billy. But yeah, so the creamsicle is going to be the part of the show where we just sort of, this is going to be a lot of discussion. We're going to go back and forth about what we liked about the show, our thoughts about the show as a whole, and then as we go through this, we'll have a nice wrap up at the end of the season as well, and we'll sort of recap everything. And so when thinking about Psych, I always seasons 3 through 5, for me, it's a sweet spot of the show. There's so many great episodes, and I kind of get locked into those, but I forget because you're like, oh, season 1, yeah, it was good, it wasn't great, but then you go back and you start to watch again, and actually, no, it was a really good season. It is the worst season out of all of them, but it doesn't mean it's a bad season. And so when rewatching this episode, I just forgot how good it was. And what I love about the pilot is that a lot of times when you're watching a pilot, it's far different from what the rest of the show becomes. And with Psych, the only thing that really changes is Lassie's partner. They replace her with Juliet, which was A+ right move. And some of the set designs, right? Henry's house is different. The police station's different. So set pieces, that stuff kind of changing is whatever. But the show keeps a lot of its charm and only builds upon that. And so you get some running gags in this episode that run throughout the entirety, of the show, which is absolutely great because this show is charming. This show is funny. This show is smart. And these are all the things that we love about the show. You get at least a smidgen of, I love that word smidgen, in the pilot episode, which is great. So, one thing I wanted to note here as well is that my wife, she really wanted me to hammer this point home. She is not a fan of skinny Sean. She loves fat Sean. So she's
chubby Sean. We've all been there. Chubby Sean.
Yeah. I think my wife is a chubby chaser, if we're being honest.
Everybody's a little bit. You have to be more jovial when you're. It's a jolly kind of guy.
That's right.
You got to make up for your lack of definition in the body with some.
That's
some
right.
Humor.
That's
but
right.
I couldn't agree with you anymore. It's a show that's really true to itself. Even in the finale, it is just an episode of Psych that they kind of give some finality to. And in the pilot, obviously, they're fine tuning these characters until we get to about season 3 or 4 to really hone in on how Sean should be tackling each case, how he relates to the audience and whatnot. But it never really tries to be meta or over the top. All of the jokes are exactly what you expect. And the show's never lazy. And I can tell when a show is lazy. I'm not saying I'm, the ultimate TV guy, but I did get the handle of TV's own Billy Delaney, and I think I've earned it. And this show, it has 1 or 2 things storyline-wise throughout the entirety of the series. And we're talking 2 movies, a musical, and 8 seasons of awesomeness that really was never lazy. And even in the pilot, they do such a good job of trying to construct almost a believable scenario to get you on board. And I think it does it incredibly well. I mean, the running gag of Gush. There's another one.
Yeah.
Guts, whatever you want to call him, being squeamish. And that is, that is literally the longest running joke in the show. And then you have the pineapple where he's like, should I slice this up for the road? And that was improvised, and it wound up being the show's calling card, the pineapple. And sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's hidden, but we'll point it out in every episode. This one's obvious. It's literally when he picks it up right before they go, and you see the blueberry for the first time, which is the car he has for the entirety of the show, and I love it. I tried to get one at one point.
What kind of car is it? It's oh shit!
It's like a little Toyota.
Yeah, it's a little hatchback.
Yeah.
And so this is this is a part of the show we're going to call That's Right. Where
Toyota Echo.
Toyota Echo. There we go. Where we're just going to talk about again some more of our favorite moments, best ofs, and some useless trivia. So like Billy said, the blueberry is seen. Like I said, a lot of the things you get throughout the entirety of this series, you get in this episode. So you get the blueberry, you get the pineapple, you get Squeamish Gus, the Psych logo, right? This is a little fun bit of trivia. It started off blue, right? and then later on becomes green. And as you can see, if you're watching us right now, the green is a prominent color, in the show, as is the pineapple. And this is just, man, I can't ever state enough how much I love this show, and it gets better and better. And when next week when we talk about episode 2, the spelling bee, it's great. It's
that
good
is
shit.
One of my favorite episodes, and I know I'm going to be throwing out a lot of hyperbole here, but that's one of the ones I go back and rewatch. Like, I've seen that episode, no lie, at least 40 times. And some of my favorite episodes, like Sean 2.0, which I think is season 5, episode 9, I've seen that probably 60 times. Like, this is how much I love this show. A lot of people will put on music when they're bored or cleaning their room. I put on Psych. And that's just the way I do things now. It has become a huge part of my life. And what was my nickname again? I loved that nickname.
Humpback Johnson.
Humpback Johnson. That was like perfect. I was a little worried where you were going to go with it. But Joe, you fucking knocked that absolutely out of the park. I mean, I could talk about this episode literally all day. There are a couple things that also I'm a nitpicky guy. You can ask Rossi. I kind of bring things down. I liked Planes, Trains, and Automobile on PCP, but again, it hurt me at moments. The hats thing stink. The running IBM thing too, where they kind of show him and that lady detective that's not Juliet going back and forth, and she's kind of expounding on how smart he was. I don't need you could be running IBM, you could be valedictorian. Right. You've already established him as an amazing brain. I didn't really need that. Yeah. But you kind of balance that out with other jokes that were running through the entirety of the series. Is when Lassie's like, I'm not going to let you walk around here like some kid in a candy store. And this is my type of humor, to a T, where Sean goes, I actually worked in a candy store, and this is nothing like this. Yeah, right. There's so many times he does that, because they also build in the running gag of all of the jobs. What about that summer where you ran the Wienermobile, or the acupuncture clinic? I didn't realize experience was necessary. My favorite one of all time is when he asks, how much it's going to cost to fix my car? Are you asking Sean the psychic or Sean the guy who worked a couple of afternoons at a Mighty? Like those jokes were established in this episode, and they still build on them.
Nothing fills my pie hole but pie.
So good.
Right. One of the things I loved in this episode too is, you've got Lassie and his partner there walking down the street, and they're trying to tell him, we got something here, and Lassie, in typical Lassie nature, just tells him to go pound sand, and right before they're walking into a restaurant to have lunch, and right before he walks in, he says, "Don't eat the chicken."
Yep.
Right, and he's like, pfft. And so his partner orders his cheese quesadilla, and he calls
Coward.
her, what's his coward, and then he wants the extra chicken, and then he sees the chef, sneezing, a million times, and then Sean, tells Gus that's so and so, and he has the worst hay fever I've ever seen, and you feel that wind. It's come, and then so it's little things like that, and I love how Sean needles Lassie just over and over and over. And then I can't remember what episode it is, but I think it's the one where Sean becomes the kicker for the football team, and
Tuesday Night Lights.
Yep, and they beat him to Lassie beats him to the crime scene, and Sean gets all flustered, and Lassie's like, "What? No witty comeback?" And he's got that wry smile on his face, and those two are just the perfect foils, for each other.
And Lassie is, Carlton Lassiter, Timothy, I always forget how to say his last name. Ombudsman, is by far and away, I mean, they're all great actors. Gus is amazing. Sean is amazing. But he is by far, unbelievably great actor, and he shows it a little bit in this episode, but as the series progresses, he is without question the strongest actor on the show. He's amazing.
Oh, he's tremendous. And so one thing Gianna pointed out in the chat is she said, thank God, interim Chief Vic took a chance on them. So one thing that just sort of popped into my brain, and this comes back into play in later season 7, season 8. But a question I want to ask you is, at the end of the episode, right? Sean just barges into her office because he wants his check. And she says, don't ever, barge into my office. And then you see Henry is sitting there, and, those two were talking. Do you think all this time she knows about Sean and she's just playing along? Or do you really think that she doesn't know until,
I think they would kind of have to have a suspicion, because do you believe in psychics?
Me? No.
No, I don't either. And I don't think anyone really does. But, I mean, he sells himself every episode, and it is kind of, general observations, but they kind of do a really good job, as we've talked quite a bit about, establishing his supernatural ability with that kind of stuff. And he's just kind of a bright guy anyways to be able to put stuff together. And in later episodes, you will get to meet his mother, Sybil Shepherd, who also... he gets this from her. She has a telegenic memory. So not only does he see everything and remember everything he hears, he can instantly call it back because of his mother. So he's kind of like a supernatural regular dude. Like those are powers I wish I had, because I will tell you, I will look at something and I will forget it in 10 seconds unless it's an episode of Psych.
Right. Yeah. So that that's a character that my wife hates. She goes, oh, she's awful. She's a terrible mother because, she, and I'm like, yeah, but I fucking hate, I don't hate Henry. Henry is very much a prick. And I love how their relationship evolves, throughout the series, and especially, at the end, it becomes very sweet, and it's an important relationship, between those two. And I think, one of the things that we've been kicking around and I want to do is that we're going to go episode by episode, talk about the shows and all our favorite bits about it. But I also want to sprinkle in, either in between seasons or whenever, is character studies, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Sean, Gus, Lassie, Juliet, Henry. I want to do one on Buzz. I fucking love Buzz.
Buzz.
He is one of the best minor characters ever. And then we can do an episode on cameos, because there's so many great cameos, in this series. And so, what we hope is that people watching us talk about this have a good time. They interact in the chat, with us. Someone like Rossi. I believe Rossi's still in here. I hope Rossi's still in here. But I know Rossi is a big, like, How I Met Your Mother, guy. And I know, like, shows like that, shows for me like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Archer, Rick and Morty. Those are shows that I oftentimes, will just put on when I'm going to bed. This is another one of those shows. And I hope this becomes a show like that for Rossi, and so, I don't expect a ton of people to jump on board and to watch for the first time with us, but I hope we do get some of that. And I hope we do kind of, reach out to some people like that, like Rossi, because the show is so great. And if you've watched it 1,000 times, like Billy and I have, and you're watching along with us, and Gianna, like she said earlier in the chat, just started watching during the pandemic, and now she's hooked, and other people who love the show will start watching. It's a fun show. If you've never watched before, it's a fun show. It gives you a little bit of everything, especially if you like it's a good procedural, but the humor is spot on, because it's all those references, that we love. And I could talk about this show to the wall, and I'm glad that, and I'm glad that I've got Billy to talk about it with, and I'm sure we'll have some guests on the show throughout the course of this as well.
Oh yeah, so, we got a huge Psych following. We got the boys from Crossing State Lines. I know Wes and Pat, good friends of ours, are huge fans of the show. And that's the thing. If you're listening to this the first time and you're a member of the DSG and you haven't seen the show, well, you can watch along with us. And if not, thank you for the support. I know our guy, says he's going to start watching the show soon too. He's going to watch it tomorrow. So I encourage you to go out, watch it once a week if you can't binge them all. But if you can binge them all, go ahead and just come back for these episodes. We'd love to have you. Again, it's literally my favorite show of all time, and it just keeps getting better. So next week, as we can start to land the plane here a little bit, if you will, we're going to talk about Spelling Bee, which is, again, it's going to happen a lot. One of my favorite episodes.
Meacham. He went to the store to buy some Mitchum.
Yeah.
And a banana.
Wants to hear Venus. Buy Bananarama. Banana. Definition, yellow fruit.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, so the pilot was great. The second show is really where it takes off, especially with the moments that we just had there. Just, you get these random, just off the wall moments, and I really can't wait to talk about that one. And the more I've gone back and watched season 1 recently, the more and more I love it. And it was a season that I just didn't watch for such a long time because
I remember when I forget who was trying to get into it, and they were like, "Should I watch season 1?" And everybody was like, "No." I was like, "Well, fuck yeah, you watch season 1. Season 1 has some high highs, and right when we get into the middle of it, there's a few episodes that I've seen, a trillion times, so I'll be able to quote those verbatim as well. But Spelling Bee is going to be up there as well for that one. A lot of good stuff. The flashback in that one isn't as good, but we'll leave that for next week. Anything else we got to tackle here?
No, you know what? I think we did a good job. As I was telling Billy earlier, I'm a nervous Nelly. And so my anxiety was a little high going into this, but I love it. I'm glad we had some great interaction in the chat. Bruh. Can't wait for that cake on Saturday, but I hope you give the show a watch. It's a lot of fun. Rossi, Gianna, thank you guys for popping in. We got Frank there with Long Branch Penny Whistle.
One of the greatest running backs in the history of our Madden League. And if you don't know, now you will know. I name all of the people who aren't regular players, like the drafted and created players, after Gus and all of his nicknames. So Long Branch Penny Whistle was one of the legends in our league.
Yeah, so was it Lodge Blackman?
Oh, Lodge Blackman was an
I picked him as a free agent,
well.
and he scored touchdowns, baby. So, until next week, my friends. So next week, actually, we'll probably have to do on Wednesday night because it's Thanksgiving on Thursday.
Oh,
yep. So just pay attention to us on Twitter. You can follow Billy on Twitter at BillyD2411. I've recently changed my Twitter handle at Backcracker Dr. Joe with no E. Working title. I'm trying to get all my shit. Lined up there. So, but just you can watch us on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook. Audio, Billy, will be coming out.
Audio will be coming out. I think we're probably going to start it at least on the PCP one until I can figure out. But who knows? But we will again tweet out all of those things. I think the PCP account may be the home right now for this little podcast we have. I think it seems to be working pretty well for TLDR, but all TBD for right now. But I've heard it both ways. First episode, I don't know about you. I had a fun time.
Loved it, brother. So until next week, man, have a good one.
Frank says hi.